So there's for instance a king, and a king probably represents a man, but sometimes it's going to be, some women like to run things the way men do, and so sometimes, even though it's a king, it might sometimes be a woman. And I think you can figure out whether it's going to be a man or a woman by looking at the other cards in the spread. And so, how do you know? Is it a man or a woman? And maybe in the beginning you don't know. But what you do is you ask yourself the question, is it a man or a woman? And you see what the answer is. And I wanted to make this point because I think it relates to the general question about how do you read cards. And I think it's not so much knowing the answer, but it's more about asking the right questions. And you, the reader, should be able to ask better questions, or questions that give more revealing answers, because you have some experience of cards and you probably know more about the card, about what cards can do, than the questioner does. Do you know what I mean? It's not like a jigsaw puzzle and this card fits exactly in here. It's more like you have to, or if you can, wonder and knowing what you know, ask important questions that the reader maybe would have asked that the questioner rather maybe would have asked if he or she had known what to ask about. Because the point is, the reading is about the questioner, and about the questioner being better off, or clearer, or more confident after the reading. So it's not like you want to give a magical solution to all their problems. Sometimes, I know, sometimes you sort of wish that you could snap your fingers and solve the person's problems. But the thing is, if you could do that, the question wouldn't be any better off. The problems may not exist, but they would pretty quickly be back at that same position and in the same kind of trouble, because they haven't learned anything from the situation. They haven't learned how to deal with it and how to solve the problem and how to reach the point they want to reach at. So they're not really better off or better able to deal with what's going on in their life if you give them this solution and solve the problems for them. I think, anyway. So with court cards, in your moments of study or quiet moments, it's a good idea, I think, to ask, to think about what is each court card's lesson. Because the King of Cups is going to be, let's say the King of Cups represents somebody else in my life. This person is going to be teaching me certain lessons. And what are these lessons? Whereas, what's the Queen of Wands' lessons? And at the same time, this Queen of I can be represented by the Queen of Wands. So I have certain lessons to learn to do with, let's say, power and how to use it. And so if you look at each card and spend some time wondering what are the lessons that this card has to learn, the lessons that this card is going to teach. Also, what is this card, what is its concern? What does the Queen of Wands care about? Whereas, what does the King of Cups care about? And they're going to be different things. And then we can look at the card as well and ask, what's the Queen of Wands' good points? What's her bad points? Because the bad point may be the Queen of Wands upside down. Too pushy, too bossy, too interfering in the lives of other people, instead of being able to sit back and let people come to her. And so, what are the strengths and weaknesses of each card? And what does the Queen of Wands know? But also, what does the Queen of Wands not know? And when you come up with answers to these questions, you're in a much better position to deal with the card in a reading. I think that's about 10 minutes. Okay, it wasn't 10 minutes, so let's say okay, there are 14 cards in each suit. We've got the ace through to the 10, and then the king, queen, page, and the knight, and that gives us 14. And 14 is 7 times 2, and there's something about the number 7 because there are 7 days in the week. So 7 in its own way is a number of completion. It's like a complete cycle. It's a little chunk that sort of belongs within itself. So can we do something with the fact that 2 times 7 is 14 and there are 14 cards in each suit? And so we can do 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9 and 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10, because the odd numbers are odd and they have something in common. The even numbers are even and they have something in common too. And often the odd numbers are considered as being positive, which means they go out and make things happen. Whereas the negative numbers, or rather the even numbers, are considered to be negative, and that means that in their own way they react to circumstances. So with the ace suit of the 10, then we've got 11, which should be here, and 12 is here, 13 is here, and 14 is here. And we have the page, the knight, the queen, and the king. And that's how they normally come. But the knight is masculine, so it really belongs here with number 11, right? Just to keep it masculine. And that means that the king has to be masculine as well, and that's number 13. Whereas the page is going to be 12, and the queen, I think, is going to be 14. Do you know what I'm getting at? Just to keep the positive and negative in sequence. Instead of page, knight, queen and king, and ending with the king as the 14th card, we really ought to end with the queen. Can this mean something? Take the knight and 11 together. The 11th card, I don't like 11 as justice, and I switch them back. So I take the knight as the strength card. So what does the knight do? Strength is, does this mean that the knight is supposed to be like a knight in shining armour? The knight is going to be a problem solver. You've got the woman closing the lion's mouth. The knight is good for and at his best when he is given a problem and is able to solve it, not through force, through, if you remember that Knight of Swords, rushing into things, but the knight is at his best when he is gentle and patient. Whereas with the page, pages are hard. I sort of never like pages, not that I never like them, but they're kind of tricky. And if we take 12 as a hanged man, this can be a reason why people look at the page and they're not full of confidence, because with the page you're sort of on the receiving end. You don't have much power, and the page needs patience the same way that the hanged man needs patience, because things are not going to go your way and you just have to let time take its course. Then at the same time we've got the king is number 13, and the 13 is a death card. So kings are good for helping people make new beginnings, or finishing up a cycle and putting the full stop at the end of the sentence, and then preparing the ground to move on to the next new beginning. And if we follow this through, the last of the numbers is 14, that goes with the queen. So the queen relates to temperance, and the queen shows you how to evolve, how to blend different elements, or how to blend different characteristics and different possibilities and different situations and turn them into something that has a future. So that's something you can look at, and especially with the court cards, but you can look at the minor trumps as well. The ace relates to the magician, the 2 relates to the high priestess, and so on. But I think the more interesting part it comes here with 11, 12, 13 and 14, the knight, the page, the king and the queen, rather than the page, the knight, the king, the queen and the king.